here today with Brian Leedman, Chairman of NeuroScientific Biopharmaceuticals. Brian, thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Are you able to share some of the background to Neuro?
So it came about from Harold Clough, who's a patriarch of the biotech industry through the funding that his family, McRae Investments, invest in different ways, particularly in Alzheimer's disease. He's very keen to find a cure for that, and they've licensed the technology from the University of Copenhagen, which they've brought to Perth in partnership with UWA and also the University of Tasmania to take this novel new drug into human trials, and that's why NeuroScientific was listed to raise money to do that.
Now, I understand the technology was formed off the back of a rat study. What were the findings of that?
So what happened was the University of Copenhagen took 8 rats and they severed an optic nerve in each of those rats. And in that, they then injected this peptide called mTOR. And mTOR did something rather novel. It actually regenerated the neurons in the optic nerve, which is basically brain cells, and they did an MRI scan firstly to show that the optic nerve had been severed, and then afterwards, 4 weeks later, they did another MRI scan and showed that all 8 rats had completely regenerated their optic nerves. Now that is the first time that's ever been shown in science. So it's a very novel new drug. Just because it works in a rat doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work in a human, but I'm quite intrigued to find out, and that's why we're here to commence our human trials early next year using this mTOR.
So where is the technology at now?
So we're doing some additional animal studies in rabbits and pigs, and then once we've released those results later this year, we'll then begin commencing enrolment of human patients. These will be healthy young men and women who will volunteer to have this drug, because we need to show that the drug is safe before we can go into more safety and efficacy studies.
And what is the rollout process for a drug of this nature?
Well, usually, if I was being honest about how long a drug takes to come to market, it's a long process, it's a very expensive one, typically 10 years to take a drug from a test tube to an approved product. But in the case of NeuroScientific and this mTOR, I strongly believe that we only need to establish safety, because the big pharmaceutical companies are all focused on trying to find an effective treatment for dementia. And if you can regenerate your own neurons, the damaged neurons in the brain, or slow down the progression of such a disease like Alzheimer's, then you've got potentially the greatest drug ever. So we need to establish safety in humans before the big pharmaceutical companies would hopefully then license it from us and then take that forward into efficacy studies.
Are you able to share a little bit about the team who's involved in this project?
Sure. So the managing director of the company is Matt Littlelow. He comes from a big pharma background, and he's also part of McRae Investments, which was the original investor in the technology. We also have Dr. Anton Uvarov, who's a PhD trained in Canada. He served actually on my board when I was chairman of Oz Biotech for 7 years. So he's someone that I've known for many years, and he told me that this is the greatest drug he's ever seen. So that certainly tweaked my interest. And then of course myself, as chairman of the company, I guess my role was really to take this company public, raise that money, promote it going forward, and hopefully then look for an exit of the company after, say, 2 years once we've established safety in humans.
So for investors looking at the company now, what are the milestones they should be watching closely over the next 3, 6, 12 months?
Well, I think in the case of all pharmaceutical companies or biotech companies, if you're not in a human trial, you're not in the game. So we're not actually in human trials yet. That's going to start in the early part of next year. So in terms of very early milestones, we've already talked about the rat study. We're now moving into rabbits and pigs. They'll have that completed by the end of this year. These are key milestones before we commence human trial enrolment, which will be in the early part of next year. I think it'll take about a year to enroll all the patients in that safety study, and then we'll need to follow them for another 12 months to actually show that there was no adverse events. So I'm really looking at a 2-year play.
What's the importance of the 2-year safety study?
So obviously we need to follow the patients for 12 months after we've recruited them. But my understanding or experience in the biopharmaceutical game is that the big pharmaceutical companies are looking for a novel new treatment for dementia because everything to date has failed. And there's no way they'll look at licensing or acquiring this technology until we can at least establish that it's safe in a human trial. And at that point, once we can do so, that's when they'll come and say, hopefully, this is the plan, that they'll come and license it from us, because they will then have the ability to fund the tens of millions of dollars and the many years it'll take to bring this product to fruition.
How closely is a technology such as this being followed, do you think?
Well, to date, there hasn't been one successful drug in efficacy in the treatment of dementia. So because of the huge failure rate in this particular area, then they're looking for a novel new way of doing so. And if I could potentially regenerate damaged neurons in the brain using our drug, then not only do we have a potential cure for dementia, but also potentially, say, multiple sclerosis, head brain trauma, spinal column damage, and for all I know, it might make you smarter, it might make you live longer. I don't know until we start that human trial, but it's certainly very novel and I think very exciting.
Exciting times ahead for the company. Brian, thanks for your time.
Appreciate it, David. Thank you.